The 25th of February 2005, the dead body of a 79-year-old Polish artist, Zdzisław Beksiński, is found on the floor of his apartment in Warsaw. I imagine it must have been a gruesome scene. 17 stab wounds. He was known as an introverted, kind, optimistic person. His art, on the other hand, while I think it's very believable it was made by an introvert, was very nightmarish, creepy, and angsty. It depicted dystopian worlds full of skeleton-like people with an incredibly impressive attention to details. So for today I thought I'd make a video on an artist I love and on why that could be, that artist being Zdzisław Beksiński. Now every single Polish person who is at least a little interested in the art world knows him, and he's known abroad too, so this feels like saying, hey, I like Van Gogh, or hey, I love Monet. You know, he's no guy. He's really hard not to like. I don't think I've seen any criticism of his art to like a substantial degree, and especially like from a modern side, because I guess it was a bit controversial in the past because, you know, Polish people were prude. But still, I don't think I just like him because he's popular and I don't know I don't know enough to pick less known heroes for myself. I just really like him and to some degree resonate with his story. So in this video I thought I'll go through some facts about him and look at his art and some of my favorite examples and try to analyze it a little, and also talk about this sort of dark art in general, because I think it's just fascinating how many people love it. There are some things about dark motifs in art that seem obvious, you know, people just like it when there's something going on. We're in love with the scary. We need the bread and circuses. We pay more attention to sad and scary news stories, even if we're not impacted directly. I mentioned in my video on true crime, I think, but scary and thrilling situations release dopamine in the human brain, so that's kind of an artistic one, I guess. Just biology. Beksiński was born to a wealthy, distinguished family on the 24th of February 1929 in Sanok. He was an only child. During World War II, under the German occupation, he went to a trading school in Sanok, back then called Polnische Offentliche Handelsschule. Usually I tend to apologize for my shit pronunciation of foreign words, but I think I don't need to here. And he also received underground education, so essentially secret illegal lessons that were held for the post-war reconstruction of Poland and to counter German and Soviet threats to eradicate Polish culture. According to Nazi racial theories, Slavs needed no higher education and they were supposed to be turned into uneducated serfs for the superior Aryan race. So the only schools that remained open were trade schools and courses for factory workers. And the education in Polish, just in general, was banned and punished with death, and all universities were closed to non-Germans, and their resources were stolen or destroyed, or at least attempted to. I've been to a great museum, and there are so many stories of people risking their lives to try to save knowledge and save old books from the Germans and the Soviets. Anyway, all participants of the underground education were constantly risking their lives too. The Polish professors who didn't get sent to death camps still held these lessons in private apartments, so yeah, that's a bit of a fun, maybe not some fun fact. Jan Beksiński also played the piano. His mother made him.
Ja po prostu nie wierzyłem w siebie jako w malarza. Nigdy chyba do do bardzo późnego jakiegoś momentu, kiedy już byłem człowiekiem w dużej mierze dojrzałem, to znaczy po studiach i już od paru lat pracowałem. Natomiast poprzednio ja po prostu umiałem rysować. Miałem oczywiście wystawę w gimnazjum i wszyscy mówili, że mam talent i tak dalej, i tak dalej. I ty dopiero pojedziesz, to im pokażesz, jak to się maluje, ale ja nie sądziłem, że to tak łatwo będzie. To znaczy nawet jak pojechałem do Krakowa na studia, zetknąłem się ze sztuką nowoczesną, nie rozumiałem, o co idzie, ale mi się wydawało, że właśnie ja nie rozumiem, a nie, że tamto jest głupie, prawda, co pokazują. I raczej sądziłem, że ja po prostu nie potrafię. Ja użytkowo rysowałem masę w patetycznych pozach ustawionych partyzantów, no bo taka była wtedy, takie były trendy, prawda, owiązanych jak u Grotgera jakimiś tam opaskami zakrwawionymi. Na czole nieoficjalnie produkowałem, powiedzmy, ponieważ Playboy wtedy nie istniał, ani Penthouse, no więc na użytek własny oraz kolegów inne rysunki, które ksiądz raz przychwycił, prawda, i w czasie rekolekcji zaczął mówić z ambony, bo wtedy się w kościele odbywały, że po nazwisku nie powiedział, tylko jest tu jeden taki między wami, który robi takie wstrętne rysunki. Mówi, ty, synu, umrzesz, a twoje wstrętne rysunki gorszyć będą jeszcze pokolenia. Mówi, to wszystkie ławki zaczęły trzeszczeć i wszyscy zaczęli oglądać na mnie, się schować pod ziemię.
Wanted to study art or photography in a university where he got accepted, but his father convinced him to study architecture instead. While studying there, he got married to Zofia Helena Stankiewicz, who finished Roman philology. One of my favorite paintings of his is definitely this one. Beksiński loved music. He listened to it while painting, which I think can enhance the artistic process. I know that some artists say it's a distraction for them. I've seen it especially from like art teachers. I don't think that's a universal experience, and music can just get you into the right mood, or maybe even help you with, overthinking and give you ideas and stuff like that. He tried his best not to convey any obvious meanings in his art so that everyone interprets it themselves. But I still think this painting could be some sort of reflection of, his life, maybe even not consciously. His mother hoped to raise a musician, but from what I know, he wasn't really into that. But he still listened to music a lot. He once said that he can only paint while listening to music, and he can only listen to music while painting, and also that sometimes he would listen to music for 10 or maybe even 14 hours a day. A National Museum in Wrocław listed some of his favorite musicians: Alfred Schnittke, Franz Gregg, Franz Liszt, Johannes Brahms, Gustav Mahler, Franz Schubert, Anton Dvorak, Cesar Franck, Henryk Mikołaj Górecki. I'm not sure about my pronunciation of all of these names. I did Google them. Most of them are classical musicians, but he also really enjoyed pop and rock. He mentioned in an interview that he had to have his hearing checked by a doctor because he feels like he needs to have the music literally smash and tear him apart, which I really understand, and it resonates with me. And I listen to different genres, but I think, interestingly enough, our reasoning in picking out music is the same. I didn't know that before doing research for this video, but he called this emotionalism, just looking less on the form of the music and more on the energy of it, which landed us in completely different genres and music composed a century apart from each other. But I just feel like I get it. And this piece is obviously connected to music in some way. I can't help but wonder what he listening to, because we know he was listening to something. We may never know. But it's just fascinating how all the bone-like fingers and the mouth of the figure almost merge with the trumpet. And, there's so many of them and they're just so tangled, and I love his attention to detail. And also, is this supposed to be a bad thing that they're merged to the trumpet? Like, maybe not. Beksiński himself said that he doesn't view all his paintings negatively, and they often get misinterpreted. Maybe this is about how connected he was to music. The way the fingers, the art medium here just being the trumpets, and I really like how the face has almost no features. I think it's just maybe not relevant. Maybe anyone could be the trumpeter, or perhaps the creature has no other purpose but to play, or doesn't care about anything but playing. But once again, Beksiński left his paintings for us to interpret in our own way. This is just how I see it. When it comes to all of these paintings I'm going to show today, I encourage anyone watching to think about them themselves. So maybe you have a different interpretation. You can write it and leave it in the comments. I would love to hear it. Like, I would really, really love it. This is not just like, let's drive an engagement by encouraging people to write something. I'm just genuinely interested because I see various interpretations. Sometimes I feel like they're shallow and they are kind of going, like they started associating Beksiński with the topics of death, for example, which I'm not saying that's unreasonable, but I don't think we should just think death, see the painting, and only work off of this assumption that it's going to be about death, because it doesn't have to be. Maybe some are, probably. It's just that I don't think this is like this assumption that we have to make, and I don't think he would like that. He was saying that people misinterpret his paintings constantly, so that's one thing. After finishing his studies, he worked in construction. He participated in some local government. I don't know what exactly he was doing, but that's not relevant, I think. The political system back there was different from right now, and I don't even know how to translate it. So, yeah, they had a child, their only son, Tomasz, who later became a famous journalist and radio host. Zdzisław also worked on designing bus elements up to the 70s, and apparently he was great at it. I don't know much about like vehicle designing. He was doing like concept designs, I think, but even if I looked into them, I don't think I would be able to like judge it, but he was known to be good at it. Like very inventive and very creative, and just knowing how to make things look good and be practical at once. Most of the time he didn't work full-time though, because he was also devoting a lot of time to his artistic passions, photography, sculpture, drawing, and painting. As a young artist, Beksiński took a lot of interest in photography to go by his art like in order, winning several international competitions. Even he's mostly known from his black and white photography, where his models are presented in quite unusual poses, often wrapped with rope, looking deformed and scared. In some of his pictures, the model was his wife. The motive of being restrained was quite common in his art in general. In his paintings, character would often be like trapped in something, held in place by something, or maybe surrounded by walls. So there's this motive of being trapped in some way, not being allowed some freedom, maybe freedom when it comes to expression. As I've said, his parents made some decisions for him, like with the piano, with what he studied. He was, part of the type of family that was definitely loving, but they just made decisions for him. They were like distinguished, and they wanted everything to be serious. And this is just my interpretation. I've seen people say that, and I think it checks out. But the camera, couldn't take pictures of what didn't exist. So after some time, some time, he moved on to techniques that gave him more freedom of displaying the unreal. His next interest was sculpture. He mainly used metal, wire, and tinware. His works can be viewed in a museum in Wrocław, and then he moved on to drawing. His drawings were at first semi-abstract, then he moved more towards this eroticism, sadism, and masochism. Around 1964, he started painting. He was getting advice from artists Tadeusz Turkowski and Bronisław Naczasem. He never gave his paintings titles because he wanted each viewer to interpret them in any way. He didn't want to give people suggestions. The element of dreams is quite relevant here too. He himself said that he used painting to, quote, photograph dreams.
Ja rzeczywiście mam masę warstw na obrazie, ale te warstwy na obrazie, wbrew najświętszym zasadom technologii, to jest jakby walka o formę. Zaczyna się od postaci takiej, która coraz tam zmienia kształt i pod spodem jest x tych postaci, a niejednokrotnie postać przemienia się w twarz, a twarz w drzewo. Wie pani, na końcu jest całkiem inny obraz niż był na samym początku. Ja filmuję sobie tam na kamerze wideo w trakcie roboty, niechlujnie, bo to tak z ręki jest zrobione. Zresztą kamera wideo rozdzielczość ma wiadomo jako. Ale po prostu jest to taka dokumentacja, sobie później mogę puścić to i zobaczyć, w którym momencie bezpowrotnie spieprzyłem obraz. Szczególnie, że kamera wideo ukrywa to, co ja bym chciał ukryć od razu, mianowicie pociągnięcia pędzla. Tam od razu tego nie widać i wygląda, że ten obraz był lepszy na początku, jest gorszy na końcu, co do końca takie nie jest, bo on na początku po prostu raził mnie prymitywną fakturą, która kamera wideo nie ujęła. Ale tym niemniej widzę, że niejednokrotnie dużo lepsze było na początku, a później schrzaniłem przez to, że już za bardzo się zmęczyłem tamtym, przerabiałem tą formę coraz inaczej i właściwie ta końcowa coraz gorsza, także ja niejednokrotnie wracam i jeszcze raz zaczynam malować inny obraz, przyjmując za punkt wyjścia jakiś etap jednego z poprzednich obrazów. I to jest choćby ten obraz, który tutaj na ścianie jest w tym miejscu z tą postacią, która niesie dziecko. To jest, wie pan, jakiś etap obrazu, który został zakończony jako twarz en face, wie pan, ale w pewnym etapie przejrzałem tego, to była postać niosąca dziecko, to się później przerabiała i później się ta postać była fajniejsza, później ten obraz, który ostatecznie z tego się zrobił. Później zacząłem malować i namalowałem ten obraz już jako na zupełnie innej płycie pilśniowej, jako powiedzmy kontynuację jakiegoś etapu malowania tamtego obrazu.
A painting from 1984. It depicts two skeleton-like, emaciated characters hugging. I think they feel much more human than a lot of his other characters. And I think the motive of love is quite obvious here. Did they die and met in the afterlife? Like, did love kill them? Or maybe they're saying goodbye to each other because one of them looks far more dead than the other one? Or maybe they're alive, but there's something that died in them, like internally, psychologically, because of the way love can hurt you mentally. Or maybe it's positive. Maybe it's just that love has become all that there is to them, and the rest is non-existent. This is why they're like sucked out of everything. But maybe this is just how they feel, and not how they are. There's something about this painting that doesn't allow me to feel like it's negative, though. Sure, it's nightmarish and scary because of the way characters look, but also there's something about just that hug and about the way their bodies are in a way tangled and wrapped together, just clinging to each other and holding on as tightly as possible. That just resonates this warmth and love and calmness, and I'm not about to cry. over a painting. Beksiński's first major exhibition success was an exhibition of his 30 or so paintings on purely fantastic subjects, organized in 1964 in Warsaw by the critic Janusz Bogucki. While the avant-garde critics turned their backs on Beksiński once and for all, considering him a renegade, the audience loved the exhibition. He sold all the paintings on display.
Na pewno istnieje wizja obrazu, z tym, że wie pan, ja już dawno przestałem dążyć do wizji, bo się przekonałem, że jeżeli człowiek trzyma się samemu za hajs, prawda, i pcha w jakimś kierunku, że to ma być właśnie to, co mi na początku przyszło do głowy, to powstaje wymęczony obraz, który absolutnie nie oddaje ani wizji, ani człowieka nie zadowala. Czyli ja się nauczyłem jakby pracować na luzie. Jeżeli na początku miała być namalowana postać idąca z dzieckiem, a zaczęło z tego się początkowo robić akt, później ukrzyżowanie, na końcu wyszła twarz, to ja już nie usiłuję się trzymać przy tej idei, bo tylko jadę, wie pan, na zasadzie zupełnej, bo myślę sobie, dlaczego ja miałbym to, co mi przyszło do głowy w ubiegłym tygodniu, miałoby być mądrzejsze od tego, co mi przyszło do głowy pod koniec bieżącego tygodnia pracy.
Another well-known painting of his is this one. It shows a head with its mouth wide open in this expression of terror and dread just sticking out from the ground. Like, is it just head, or is there a body restricted on the ground with only the head sticking out? And it seems like it's forced to swallow these strange creatures. They're also skeleton-like, but not just like in a human way. Some of them to a bigger and some to a smaller degree, but they look like spiders. Apparently, Beksiński had OCD and arachnophobia. I think this might be related to it, like he was painting out his deep fears. Although once again, he claimed not to even know himself the meaning of his paintings. This is just what I read in one article, but you know, if he was really so terrified of spiders, probably he had them in dreams, and since he was painting dreams, I don't think this is a far-fetched. I really enjoy the earthy tones of his paintings. They're muted, but not in a dull way. You know, the colors are there, but they're not destructive or eye-straining. I guess another thing I like about Beksiński's art is that it makes me feel oddly calm, and this might be one of the reasons why. Maybe it's the colors, maybe, I don't know. This one is hard to answer for. I really like this painting from 1973. It shows a deformed man lying on a high tower. I've seen people saying it's a tomb, but the first thing I saw was a tower with a cross on it, which would change the scale a lot. I mean, it's high in the sky. This is why I thought of the tower. We can see clouds, but perhaps the tomb is just this gigantic. Because of the cross, I think it's reasonable to assume religion has something to do with what's happening here. Maybe the man died. Probably he did. I've seen people saying he's waiting for the final judgment, but also it looks like he has a halo on his head, so maybe it is already known that he was a good person, but the final judgment isn't coming. Maybe it's just that he died. Everything is so grandiose and big. This is the end. What I love about his painting are the colors and the tones, and how he goes from darker shades of brown and red to dark yellow and copper and bits of blue. Like it's still very grim, but also there is just something beautiful about it. He was a part of the Association of Polish Artists and Designers. He was doing a lot of charity and donated a lot of his paintings. They as family decided to leave Sanok after the decision from the city to take apart their housing place, which there were other people living in this building too. From what I understand, this wasn't anything like super malicious. There was some from other building was just deteriorating and no attempt helped at fixing it, and it wasn't safe, and so they moved to Warsaw, where they lived with both Zdzisław and Zofia's mothers, who, due to old age, needed to be taken care of, and Tomasz lived in a separate apartment, but still relatively close to them. Another painting I really like is this one from 1975. It looks almost as if it's not painted by Beksiński because the colors are actually really vivid here. There is bright blue, red, pink, and yellow. But I actually love vivid colors, and I think it's very cool how he did that sometimes, especially in his Gothic period, I think. But it reminds me of something that Salvador Dali would paint. Except, well, Dali's paintings conveyed some completely different emotions than Beksiński's. We're looking at this character from below, which makes it look huge, especially that, once again, it reaches the clouds. The character is walking towards us and holding a torch, and there is also some smaller creature seemingly stuck to the big one, and it's holding a cross. I don't know. This one is just simply mesmerizing to me. There is a saying, to have your head in the clouds. It's also identical in Polish. So, even if Beksiński didn't think of the English saying, he could have thought of the Polish one. It's identical, translatable one-to-one. It means to be dreamy and unattentive to surrounding reality. And again, I know that most people interpret Beksiński's paintings focusing on the motif of death, and I won't say it's never there, but this is just the act of closing yourself in the box that he wouldn't have wanted. I don't see death here. I've seen people saying, oh, it's Beksiński, it must be about death, but I don't see death here. I know it would be too on the nose for him, but there's a swallow here, and swallows in Poland symbolize the birth of new love, and also the coming of spring, and spring itself, once again, brings out to mind a lot of symbolism and, the same act of rebirth, not death. It's when after a cold, dull, grey winter, when some of our ancestors would to starve to death, comes the life and the colors, and the prosperity to some degree, because finally you could go out and get some fresh food, grow some fresh food. See how it makes sense that this is more colorful here and just harmonized, and flowers and fruits and warmth. This is what this brings to my mind. And obviously everyone gets to have their own interpretations. And I'm not going to say on whose little essay I'm sitting on right now. That's the point. But I just see this attitude of Beksiński. Well, it must be about death. It feels too simplistic for me after the year 2000, without ceasing to paint and draw. At the same time, Beksiński began to create his compositions on a computer and with the help of a photocopier. So that's one more type of art he did. Zdzisław's mother, Stanisława Beksińska, died in 1988. Zofia's mother, Stanisława Stankiewicz, in 1996. And then soon after, Zofia herself, very sick. She had an aortic aneurysm and died in 1998. And 1 year later, in 1999, their son, Tomasz, committed suicide. Because of these deaths happening so close to each other and the art and death of Zdzisław Beksiński, some people call this family cursed. Zdzisław Beksiński was murdered in his apartment in Warsaw at 6 Sonaty Street, apartment 314, on the night of February 21st to 22nd, 2005. a few days before his 76th birthday. Stabbed 17 times and then robbed. The killer was Robert Kupiec, 19 years old at the time. He and his family worked for Beksiński. I think his mother was also a friend of his. They were making like minor repairs and cleaning. And the motive was that Beksiński refused to lend him money. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Yeah, Beksiński's last painting was strange, honestly. You can clearly see it's his by the art style and the maintained attention to details and the colors. That's very minimalistic for him. The cross, I know it's just a square, but it has this cross. It looks like folds, and Beksiński didn't know it is going to be his last one. He couldn't have known. His death was sudden. So it's just strange. I mean, a lot of times where artists approach their death, it's like they know they don't have much time left. Maybe they intentionally will make like one final piece, and that's supposed to represent something like on purpose. This can't be the case here. Also, I think it's a good one to talk about the use of colors in his paintings. I feel like it represents it really well, and it's simple enough to see it. In one interview, he actually talked about his choice of muddy colors and how they paradoxically make images appear more vivid because the muddy colors are actually made out of many colors within them. He didn't really like strong color accents, especially like in his earlier work. He found them to be basic, obvious. I don't know how to translate it. I've seen him saying that in an interview, and he used Polish proverb for this. And I think including so few colors also draws your eyes to where they are, like the little, maybe still unsaturated, but more saturated than the rest places without making the entire piece brighter. And I think this is an excellent example of that, because while this is mostly toned down and unsaturated, we can see the little bit of red in the center of the cross, and I think he was brilliant for that. Obviously, he was surrounded by death, and I think a lot of his works near the end of his life represent that he was very conscious of this. Many people from his family died all at once. But this one piece is just so different, yet still in character.
A zapewne kilka obrazów, czy nawet więcej niż kilka z tego okresu znajduje się w Sanoku właśnie. Malowałem trochę wbrew sobie, powiedzmy, intensywnymi kolorami. To wynikało z mojej takiej przyjaźni z Andrzejem Urbanowiczem, który malował w ogóle obrazy psychedeliczne i takie szukał, żeby coś było z większym wykopem, jaki jest możliwy, i twierdził, że ja w ogóle błotem smaruję i że należy, prawda, malować intensywnie. No i ja się przełamywałem przez długi okres mego życia i czasem zresztą do dnia dzisiejszego mi przychodzi ochota na malowanie czegoś, ale jakieś takie farby są, powiedzmy, jak kolory zielone na przykład, które prawie nigdzie nie występują. Jak ja zacznę coś zielenią, to się tak zniechęcę gruntownie do tego, że muszę od razu wyeliminować. To wiem normalnie po zużyciu farb, które mam, że umbra naturalna, że powiedzmy ugier jasny, że tak, no to tego już setki tubek poszły, a powiedzmy zieleń monestialna, wprawdzie to jest intensywny kolor, ale tak samo inne zielenie, to mam chyba sprzed 20 lat tubki, z której połowa została wyduszona jak na razie, prawda, więc prawie ich nie używam. Czerwień to tak, czerwień ciemna, czerwień kadmowa, czy te lazury alizarynowe, no to używam na wielu obrazach, akurat tu nie ma niczego, ale w strefie cieni, powiedzmy w obrazach monochromatycznych lubię czerwień dawać.
Alright, so I lost a huge chunk of recording because I don't know, my tablet just split the recording into parts, and despite the fact that it was recording the whole time, it just didn't save a part of it. I don't understand. And later on, I also didn't have conditions to record because there was either constantly loud or there was someone around, because I don't have my own room in my home and I don't have my own room in my dorm, so I didn't have a moment to myself. So this video is taking very long to make, but yeah. So this is why my voice sounds different, and hopefully my accent sounds different. I have been editing the audio to just get rid of awkward sounds and stuff like that, and my accent's tragic in this one. I don't know what's going on with me. I am trying my best not to do the whole Ponglish thing. But yeah, anyway, let's get back to it. I think another thing about him is that and maybe that's purely personal. Maybe I don't understand how time actually works. This is so recent. Modernity started like forever ago from our perspective. The Second World War that he lived through also seems like forever ago. But Beksiński was creating digital art. When he died, I could already read, and this overlap of our lifetimes seems insignificant, but my brain can't fully comprehend it. Creepy, dreadful, melancholic, nightmarish. These are the words that come to my mind when I see most of his art. Yet we still love it. One of the topics of this video is just trying to find out why. Maybe we are all just edgelords. I think it has to do with the purpose of art and maybe just how our lives are. Beksiński was a modern artist, and he's one of the reasons why I find people hating on modern art so dumb. I have a whole video on this. But I think it's more useful to also look at this type of art through the context of just art in general and how we arrived at this. Because maybe I don't think its power depends on all that history. Even though there is certainly a case to be made about just how much a lot of modern art in general has left the idea of treating looking in a certain manufactured beautiful way being one of the key factors in art behind, and this in itself is a statement, I would say, that there is more to art, and also there can be different types, and this whole stick. Although Beksiński certainly is someone who I like to use as an example why talking about how art doesn't have to be pretty to be great. Because people who say that often call modern artists unskilled, and he certainly was not. He mastered the craft, and as I said earlier, like showing some of his paintings, they are beautiful. They're not like ugly, they're beautiful. Just in a different way, in a different manner. But I do think that just the process through which we arrived at this itself is fascinating, because people have been creating art since the dawn of humanity. Archaeologists believe that the oldest known artwork is three wild pigs painted deep in limestone cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, at least 45,000 years ago, and there are examples of cave paintings all over the world. The purpose of this prehistoric art is up to debate and probably always will be, but there are a few of likely guesses. The prehistoric artists may have painted animals to catch their soul or spirit in order to hunt them more easily, or the paintings may represent some animalistic version and homage to surrounding nature. So this would be like a religious reason. And it's not just that art might have started with religion, but also we just know it has been used for religious purposes historically a lot. It was there in ancient civilizations. Christians made it, Muslims made it, people of different Eastern religions made it, pagans made it. It was just always there in different forms, obviously, but that's a big one. That's a big reason, but I don't sure to what degree we can apply that to Beksiński. I've seen people saying that his paintings do have like some religious messaging in them, and we can see that he does have some Christian imagery, specifically the crosses. But these are not like religious paintings in a way that could be like put in a church, right? That's not the type of religious art I meant. These are not for some ritualistic reasons, and when I say ritualistic, I don't just mean some, imagined religions who do some crazy rituals in and some things we don't understand. I think a lot of the things that Christians do are also rituals. They just don't like it to be called that. The cave paintings may also be the result of basic needs of expression that is innate to human beings. Like maybe they just wanted to look at it because they thought it looks nice. That's also a big reason for art. Or they could have been for transmission of practical information, so documenting what animals they saw or what animals they hunted in particular. Because when it comes to these depictions, one very common feature in them is that they most often portray prey animals, like the type of animals that they could hunt, not necessarily predators. And when it comes to like depiction of humans, it would be like quite minimal, or they would leave like handprints. I think the handprints are really, really lovely. It's just that this idea that each of these people could like leave a little hand and it would be there for so many years, like so many thousands of years later, we have handprints of people, and they look like the type of handprints we could do, and that's there is just something about that makes me feel warm. I can't explain why. Later on, we look at ancient history, and a lot of the great architecture and artifacts would be also used for some ceremonial purposes, as I've said. But also in Egypt, for example, there were hieroglyphs, which were a way of writing and illustrating. So another purpose of art would be to tell stories. And it's another big one again. I think it's just fascinating in general to look at different civilizations and see what sorts of art they made and what effect did it have on the further history. At this point, I think it was just important to generally try to depict the world as best as they could, especially if we jump into the future a bit and look at Renaissance art, for example, with this general realism, but not yet in as a movement, but as a style. The depiction of people that was still curated to some degree to make everything look nice, but still fairly similar to what now we could achieve with photography and a bit of photoshopping, so that everything's so nice and pretty. Also, art would be an element of more functional objects. If you look at the Greek vases, for example, we can see this. But now I think especially everywhere around us there are functioning objects that also have an artistic side to them. There's art on cups, on our phone wallpapers, on our walls in general, just like the little objects we use every day, like hairbrushes maybe, or on our clothes. Or our clothes in general are artistic. If they weren't, we would only wear what's practical and not care how it looks. But why would a t-shirt need a print, if not because we like to surround ourselves with art? And someone had to make this illustration or whatever it's on the t-shirt. So, and it's on all packaging. And like if a cereal has a bee or a dragon on the packaging, it's not for functionality. It would taste the exact same if we didn't care, but we do. We buy with our eyes, and we just like to surround ourselves with things that look interesting. Another thing art was used for was social commentary and in general propaganda. And I'm not saying propaganda is something inherently negative here again. It's just information, ideas, opinions, or images, often only giving one part of an argument that a broadcast published or in some other way spread with the intention of influencing people's opinions. That's the definition. It can be created honestly and for good causes. It can be a noble patron wanting to be commemorated in a good way, in a good light. It might be a religious institution wanting to spread its message, regardless of the results, probably with good intentions. It could be political, and politics too can be good, bad, and dishonest. For example, if I make a post that's about how we should have more ramps for disabled people so that they can have easier access to buildings. This could technically be propaganda if like I make illustrations for this poster or whatever, but would I be in the wrong? I don't think so. And I think out of all of these, one already fits Beksiński's art very well, and is just to tell a story. Some ideas and feelings are just bigger than our words, impossible to describe, especially if there is a language barrier between the people, because some things are just untranslatable. One example would be that the Polish language doesn't have the word enjoy in it. I think it's a bit funny in Polish people just don't enjoy anything. This is why they're constantly complaining and angry in a way. Now I know what enjoy means, and if I have a sentence to translate that has the word enjoy in it, I will just replace it with something that's close enough, but the full meaning can never be preserved. I was on a great lecture a few days ago about translating. Actually, I'm not going to give you details, it's very niche. But the thing is, for example, when a book author uses some dialects, you can't just translate dialects like into another language in a way that will make sense. Like if I have let's say I'm translating from Polish to English a book, although if I ever go into translation, I will translate from English to Polish more likely. But if I'm translating a Polish book and it uses some regional language, how do I make it make sense for the English audience? Now, I would have to search through different regions of, for example, the UK, and just find a regional language from these different parts of the country and insert that instead of the Polish like regionalisms to just give you the sense of this language being changed in a way for some purpose, because this never comes for no reason. But this is not fully the same thing again. Anyway, because I wanted to go on a tangent about translation in general, and I realize it's not fully on the topic, although it's one of the things I am interested in. I think an image can help to represent those thoughts and feelings much better, because everyone can look at an image, and if it's not like directly related to something only one group of people would know, for example, if there is a symbolism that has to do specifically like with some proverb or something like this from one country, like other people won't get it probably, but in general, like, we'll see it, and it should have, and it should make us feel similar things. If it's not like historical or anything like that, if it's just a face, for example, and the face has emotions on it, we're all going to read it in a similar way. So it's kind of transcending these divisions. And while we don't know what exactly Beksiński was thinking when painting, he deliberately left us with images alone. He didn't give us titles. And I think that on some level that's best. It allows us to project our own problems onto the paintings and just feel seen in a way. And also like to continue on our little journey through art history. I am being very vague here, and I am missing out a lot of things. I just thought it could be useful. When it comes to modern art, I know we've skipped a lot, but I'm trying to make this video a bearable length. I think we observed something very cool with the church and noble patrons not being the most important ones to satisfy anymore, allowing the artists to paint what was important to them. People mark the beginning of modern art in various places, and I think the luncheon on the grass is a nice one because we can already see some rule breaking there. The background is too large in comparison with the figures in the front, and everything seems flattened because of that. Edward Manet did not try to hide the brushstrokes. It's not super visible on a computer screen, but I'm sure in museum it would be. The subject is scandalous, and on top of that, he painted that on a huge canvas, 208 by 216 4.5 centimeter, and this would normally be reserved for historical, religious, and mythological subjects. Like about 2/3 of other submissions to the Paris Salon, it was rejected, and subsequently, because of public outcry, displayed in the Salon de Refugee. Essentially, the Emperor Napoleon III, while he liked more traditional styles, he wanted to appease the angry people and just decided that the works of art which were refused should be displayed in another part of the palace industry. And while not everyone loved these artworks, it makes some moment of legitimacy for art that goes outside the norms. Since then, obviously, we started seeing even more of the nonconformist art. Less than 10 years later, we're already at Impressionism, concerns not really in actual objects that there are in the world, but how the light reflects of them. Post-Impressionists rebelled against Impressionists' concern for the naturalistic depiction of light and color, and they put more emphasis on abstract qualities or symbolic content than the Fauvists, and emphasize painterly qualities and strong color over the representation of realistic values retained by Impressionism, and all this in just 40 years. Art has just unraveled past the need of reproducing physical reality, especially that the photography was invented somewhere in there. So just depicting the images of reality as they are was much easier this way. So they had more freedom and had more incentive to try and go in different ways. Then we have Cubism, representing its subject with geometric shapes from many perspectives at once, and they arrive at abstract art. At least in its modern sense, it existed before in different parts of the world, just differently. It was very decorative. So the style and just concrete art, suprematism, only slightly fascistic futurism, constructivism, Dada, and surrealism. And at one point we get to Pollock and his drip paintings, pushing the abstract to the limits. No recognizable shapes, lines, nowhere for your eyes to rest. Maybe just color and energy, but that's it. I guess that's just very human to want to see how far we can go, but also just in general to search for ways of doing things differently. And at this point, the purpose of art became kind of just art for art's sake and maybe just entertainment. One thing about modern art is that it's often just focused on itself and materiality, status, and cultural outstanding. Obviously, it can still serve the purposes mentioned earlier. It can have a message, and not only one about art, just in general. It can look nice, but it still does it. It became its own topic to a degree that it never did before. Which I don't think is a bad thing, by the way. A well-known example of this would be the infamous Fountain by Marcel Duchamp, which was just a urinal, and its purpose was to question what art even is, and can we repurpose an object, even one that has been made to piss into, to be a piece of art. Everyone has their opinion on this one. I both like it for what it stands for and hate it because it seems unfair that this piece is so widely known and appreciated that many pieces that people put actual time and effort and skill into will never be. And right now I can't just become a French man living in early 20th century and do what he did. And frankly, I don't know how much can we do that hasn't been done before when it comes to art. Like, what can we do that would outdo this, right? And I thought we could go through some very simplified timeline, but also one important thing here is that, especially with modern art, the fact that something new occurred doesn't mean people aren't making the more traditional works, or I guess the type of stuff that we describe often like their styles from the past. Impressionism, for example, is like a best-selling one when it comes to what ordinary people who aren't nerds like to buy and look at and just have hanging above their couch. It's just, in a way, here's what's new at this point. My own works aren't abstract. Beksiński's paintings are not abstract. I'd still say they're modern. But I know some conservative snobs act like it's bad that we can have the modern art because they'd say the older art is better. But not only the older art didn't evaporate, at least not the art that hasn't been neglected or deliberately destroyed by some authoritarian systems, but also there are still people who make this type of stuff, if that's what they like. So just support these people and leave everyone else alone. And also, back to the topic, there are artists who don't do modern art focused on art, and maybe they still don't belong into any broader movement, and they make other stuff concerned with other topics. In general, I don't know like movements are going on right now when it comes to like in general. I feel like right now there is not like one biggest main movement, right? We would probably know. And this brings us back to Beksiński. I know it's been a long way, but we arrived. And not just Beksiński, of course. There are other artists that I think will fall under this umbrella. For example, Mariusz Lewandowski was another artist whose works I would put under this umbrella. I love the way he operates with light and how he uses these warm, light, vibrant colors and still accomplishes these dark looks. Other examples would be Ken Curry or Francis Bacon, hated by Prageru. Shame on them, watch that video, I think it's a good one. I feel like one interesting thing about modern art is that it's way more focused on individualism. Like we could observe it from the beginning of modern art, that it was more and more about like some internal feelings, not necessarily like some church or some history, or this type of stuff, or some country in general, or like external beauty. Although, as I've said, it can can be there. Um, but more on just what's inside and on feelings. And feelings are a very powerful thing to be connecting to together, because everyone experiences sadness, angst, fear, and I guess what might run, and these are the strong ones. Obviously, when it comes to happiness, it's like, yeah, happiness is cool, but I don't think it's a strong emotion like these ones. While it might have additional things to analyze, on the first place, it just resonates. It just resonates pure emotions. Even if this art isn't telling us a story, although it can, or it's not very pretty, although it can be. One of the things that it kind of proves to me is that beauty is subjective. I love it. Some people, I find it beautiful. Some people may not find it beautiful. I think it just materializes things that we're not capable of describing with words, or even maybe identifying and having understanding of, and so we don't even know how to share it with people around. It may not help us get rid of these feelings or understand the roots of them, but evoking them itself like helps us maybe to notice them, and also feel like even though words are useless, here in this case, other people do understand. Like, we don't need to explain, and that we're not alone in whatever we're going through in our minds. Especially that it's hard to make a piece like this. I don't think I could do that. So we don't see it this often, like in the day-to-day life, unless we're just scrolling online, watching it, looking at it. But that doesn't count. Like, it's not going to appear in random places. And in the case of Beksiński, he would specifically avoid presenting anything allegorical. He didn't title his paintings, did not suggest us interpretations of them, and each of the paintings were spontaneous, yet executed so well, which with so much detail, just meticulous, and in this way we can all have our interpretations. We can all project our own feelings onto the paintings, and we can all connect to them in different ways. This is a true example of the death of the author thing. It doesn't matter if Beksiński was thinking about something when painting. He didn't want us to search for his meanings of the artwork and look at them and think, oh, what was the author thinking? Like, he wanted us to have our own meanings of it, and this is incredibly powerful. I think one other thing that makes him so popular is the mystery. We can try to interpret these works however we want, and forever. It makes them more timeless, but also I think we just want to know, so we're trying our best to come up with meanings, but we can never truly know, and we can never truly trust our interpretations, so we keep on making new ones. Yeah, I think that's all from me for now. This was a long one. I hope at least something that I've said was in any way useful or interesting to you. I tried to make this video more informative than just commentary based. If you want to maybe say something about other paintings or facts about him that you think I should have included, or maybe you have any comments on the art I'm making, in the background, and maybe you have some advice on how to make it, on how to make that better, and maybe you have some interpretations of the paintings I showed, and you disagree with me. I would love it if you left a comment in the comment section down below, and for now, just stay safe, stay hydrated, and peace.